Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wahdah wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dah. Amma ba'd. Respected brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you to the monthly lecture of Center for Peace and Global Studies. I greet you with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We recite few verses to start this program. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahus samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Respected brothers and sisters, as all of you know that this is a monthly activity of Center for Peace and Global Studies. We hold this academic lecture on monthly basis online on the last Saturday of every month. So today, Alhamdulillah, we are here for our 16th lecture of the series. Our guest speaker of today, Dr. Sohaib Zafar Malik, he has joined us. We welcome him. We are honored to see him here today for this lecture. Dr. Sohaib is assistant professor at Rifa International University at the Department of Rifa Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. He has a basic degree in pharmacy and master degree in medical science and infection biology and interdisciplinary PhD in pharmaceutical sciences. He has experience of many years working in the field and coordinating different research projects. He has taught at bachelor, master, and doctoral courses and has extensive training experience in curriculum development, in research education, in philosophy of science, in science communication, and other training methodologies. He is a very well-known scholar here among the different Muslim organization, Islamic organization, different Dawah organizations, and he is a regular speaker. So we are honored to have him today here. He is the Director of Tarbiyah of Rifa International University, which is one of the prestigious universities having campuses all over Pakistan. So, Dr. Saab, I welcome you and the floor is yours. Our topic of today's discussion and his lecture is value-based education and role of teachers. So, Dr. Saab, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome and please continue.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
So I'll start talking about it. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulihil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll be talking about values-based education and the role of teachers in values-based education. But before we start defining what we mean by values-based education, let's discuss a bit about why do we need such an approach to education. What is education and how values relate to it, right? What is the purpose of education? And let's try to define what values are and then see how could we relate the need, how could we find a need to develop a method where we could put values at the center of educational process, right? So values-based education is not just about teaching some values like empathy, compassion, team, and similarly listening to others, humility. So you can say from our tradition, sabr and shukr, gratefulness, and like values like this, right? So values-based education is not simply teaching these values; it's putting these values at the center of the teaching learning process. So it's not as if we want the whole educational process to take place, and together with this educational process, we want to add some values in it. No, it's not that simple. So if we are talking about values-based education, we are talking about thinking about what. Yeah, so we need to think about what are our values, and then we need to Yeah, it was muted. So am I unmuted now? Right.
1 minute, I will mute all, then you can unmute yourself. Yes, please.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. So let's start speaking again. Okay, I think the way it's the screen is shown to me, I have my video over there on the gallery, but it's not at the center. Is it possible? Is it because of some setting or?
We can see it in the center, but I don't know.
Okay, then it's fine. Then it's fine. Okay. So values-based education is not just about adding some values into education, incorporating some values into the educational process, into the teaching learning process. It's more than that. It's about thinking what are the values that are very important to us, and then putting those values at the center of teaching learning process, at the center of all activities of the educational institutions, and then designing the whole learning experience of students, keeping those values in mind. So it's important to identify the values, but there is always this misdirection where we choose some values and then we try to artificially graft those values onto our existing educational process without thinking about. So it's not as if you teach some extra modules. If you teach a subject related to values, that's not going to work. So values-based education is more about putting values at the center and then designing the entire teaching learning process, the whole learning space, the educational ecosystem, educational environment around it. All right. Why do we need values-based education? Well, the question would be because obviously from a higher education perspective, we are in the higher education sector because we are developing people to contribute to society. A lot of it is for that, right? So whatever subject we are teaching and the students are enrolled into a degree, they are expected to perform certain functions in the society. They could be whatever subject they are studying, natural sciences, any professional studies like in healthcare or engineering or IT, computing, even if you think about liberal arts and humanities, languages, whatever degree program, after graduating from a university, the students are expected to serve the society. Of course, the purpose of education is not just to serve society, it's about human beings as well. And especially coming from an Islamic perspective, education is not just provided to fulfill a gap, to fill a gap in society. It's not just for the sake of society. So it isn't, so you don't view education from an Islamic paradigm as if there is a whole machine, society is a machine, and then you are preparing different parts that would fit in the machine, right? Of course, we want the graduates to perform a function in the society, but the purpose of education is not just limited to preparing somebody, developing somebody to serve in society. The purpose of education, first and foremost, is having that educated person. So the first and foremost, education is about that person who is being educated, right? So when you think about values-based education and think about we want to have certain qualities in a person, inner qualities, the character. So when we are talking about values, well, let's come to the definition in a bit. But it's not just about knowledge, it's not about skills, it's about character, it's about habits, it's about behaviors. So all these things that we cover in the affective domain, or sometimes we use the attitude, the word attitude, right? In the curriculum designing process, we talk about knowledge, we talk about skills, and we talk about attitude, right? The cognitive domain, the psychomotor domain, and the affective domain. So it's important to provide our students with the knowledge, the technical knowledge, the theoretical knowledge. It's very important to impart the skills as well. If they don't have the skills, they might not be able to execute their knowledge and may not be able to use the knowledge in the society. And when we talk about skills, we are talking about the soft skills as well as hard skills. Soft skills like like presentation skills, and then hard skills, like for example, for computer science, it would be programming and stuff like that. But only knowledge and skills are not enough. We need to impart the right attitude. We need to have graduates who have the right attitude, who have the power of character, who have the right habits, who have the right work ethic, and who work for the right reasons. And if we don't have all this in place, even if we teach the proper, we have the proper knowledge and we have the proper skill, what is it for if we don't have the person performing in the society, to perform and function in the society, to give a positive contribution and to have a positive impact? It's not enough to have only knowledge and skills. You need to have more than knowledge and skills. And I would argue, whenever you start thinking about things other than, in addition to knowledge and skills, values would be at somewhere at the top. So what are values? Because especially in our Pakistani concept, because I see most of we are from Pakistan, but from developing world as a whole, Muslim world as a whole, coming out of the colonial era, and we haven't still got out of it. We haven't decolonized our education system, and especially higher education system. Most of us who obtain our degrees from Europe or America, and we conduct our research over there. Our research education is over there. Our graduate education is over there. Once we come back from Europe and America or Australia, and then coming back in Pakistan, we have this inferiority complex, and we are thinking about what can't be done in our societies. The way the education system worked very efficiently abroad, and now it's not working over here properly. And we're always thinking, we have this inferiority complex that the things are not working in our society, and we transfer that inferiority complex to our students. So thinking about values, I think for us in our context, gives us an additional dimension that we require in our education system. Just by thinking clearly about what values we need to impart in our students and what values we need to focus on, it will give us the critical tools to reassess our educational priorities. Because no matter which subject we are teaching, whether we are teaching history or languages, or we are teaching healthcare or engineering or computer science or and any other, disregarding the subjects, whatever the subject is, what's most important is what are the fundamental educational values that we have and which we are imparting to our students, which we want to which we want them to have those values in their character. So I think thinking about values and which values we want to have in our students would help us decolonize our education system in general. It will give us the cognitive frameworks to think about education in a liberated way, right? Instead of just following in the footsteps of Western universities. Because because education has to be related to the environment in which the education is being imparted. So if we are teaching in Pakistani society, educational process has to serve the Pakistani society, right? And then when we think about values, which values we need, the answer to this question would come based on the context of Pakistani society. So contextualizing education and decolonizing education, that would be a big benefit when we start thinking about values in education. All right, I hope this point is clear, right? So we need values-based education because any educational process without values is not enough. It's not, that's not the whole picture. We need knowledge, we need skills, but we need the attitude. But especially in our context, it gives us an added dimension, right, of liberating our minds and giving proper education in our context. All right, so much so for why do we need values-based education. I'll get back to it, and if you have any questions about it, I'll be happy to answer it. But let's try to get more into specifics, right? What are values? How do we define values? What are values? So values are principles that guide our thoughts and behaviors, right? Values are principles that guide our thoughts and behaviors. A question that could be raised here, where do these principles come from? And this is a very important question. Where do these principles come from? Of course, all right, so in a 21st century postmodern context, you would be throwing a lot of words. The principle for respect for humanity or liberty or but what is the basis? I mean, why are we so concerned about certain values? Why are we focused on certain values and ignoring others? And the answer to this relies on where are we deriving our values from. So I would argue that these principles, these values, we get these from our worldviews, and no educational philosophy is just there like that in space. We don't just snatch it from space, right? All educational philosophies are coming from a context which is rooted in our worldview. In our case, we have these universal values, universal ethical values. But where do we get these universal ethical values from? So in Islamic paradigm, we have the divine revelation and the wahi. The divine revelation inspires certain, it results in the formation of certain universal ideals, and then those translate into the universal values. On the other hand, if you don't have a connection with the divine tradition, then you would be relying on social norms, which would lead to to some social constructs, and then social constructs, and then the values would follow from over there, right? So being rooted in social norms and customs, I don't think it's very as dignified as being rooted in a divine tradition. Because especially when you think about which values to prioritize and which values to give less importance to, it's a big question. And if you are just focusing on the social conditions, you might be ignoring the universals, right? And thinking about big questions, you have to have this divine guidance and revelation, because finding al-haq without getting divine guidance, it's not going to work. Getting that knowledge, you can have knowledge of the apparent things of our life. لكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. Most of the people don't know. يعلمون ظاهرا من الحياة الدنيا. They know the apparent things of this worldly life, right? So our knowledge without divine revelation, when we talk about the fundamentals of human nature, what should be our values, what should be the principles, what should be the yardstick for success, these are big questions. And without divine guidance, we are just loitering here and there, and then we would be struggling. To have that certainty of knowledge, to have that conviction, we need the divine guidance. All right, so we define values as the principles that guide our thoughts and behaviors. But then the question I asked was, where do these values come from? All right, so these are certain principles. Values are certain principles. Honesty is a principle, right? But why be honest? Right? Truthfulness is a principle. Compassion is a principle, right? But why be honest? Why be truthful? Why be gracious? And why have humility? Why have respect for others, right? So these are, so why? So if honesty is the best policy is the last answer, what if honesty doesn't appear to be the best policy? What would you do then? So this is where we are. If we remove the divine guidance, we are left with only some principles of utility. We'll be deciding our values based on their utility, not because of their inherent goodness, right? And for having inherent goodness, we need divine principles. All right, so I think I got a bit too carried away with this philosophical discussion. Let's getting back to values-based education. So what is values-based education? You think about what values you want to focus on, and then you develop the whole educational experience, the whole learning ecosystem, the whole educational ecosystem based on those principles. And then what you are hoping is the students who will go through this whole educational ecosystem in this way will internalize these values. They won't only be talking about these values. Their knowledge would not just be limited to certain values. So their knowledge would not just only be what is honesty, right? You can teach this in an Islamic studies course or an ethics course or a professional ethics course. What is honesty? But would they actually become honest? This is the question, right? So you can teach, you can define all day long what honesty is and what truthfulness is. And you can give some examples in the professional ethics course and modules. But would the students actually become honest and trustworthy and have respect for others and compassion and tolerant? How do they actually become that person, have that character where they have those values? So then you just don't think about what the content is going to be. You have to design the whole educational process around it. And I'll unpack this concept. I think this is very important and the need of time that we unpack this. We need values-based education, but whatever comes to people's mind usually is when we talk about values-based education, it's about certain modules in ethics, right? So if they are teaching professional ethics in higher education, research ethics, you say, okay, we are doing it, right? We have this education. We have Islamic studies where we are teaching Islamic moral principles. We have research ethics. We are teaching about research misconduct and research fraud and study design and whatnot, right? And then we have, so as if there is a whole degree program, for example, let's say an engineering degree program, the students would be studying 150 credit hours or something like that, close to that, 150 credit hours, and then just adding 2 credit hours for teaching professional ethics. We hope that they would internalize the right professional ethics. And this is very faulty conception, because when we talk about professional ethics, it's as if we are talking about they start wearing a mask, right? We are not talking about the students as human beings. We are talking about them as professionals, right? So when we teach professional ethics to doctors, we are saying, okay, you can be a bad person in your personal life, all right? You can behave as whatever way you want to behave, but as soon as you become a doctor, that is, as soon as you are interacting with a patient, you have to wear this mask of ethics, right? So from internally, from within, you are the same bad person that you used to be. And we are okay with it, right? We are not concerned that much if you are a bad person per se. All we are concerned with is when you are in your professional setting, when you are treating a patient, you should follow these ethical guidelines. Similarly, it goes for any profession, any professional training. So when we teach how to become a teacher, so we are saying, okay, you as a human being, we are not concerned about it. What are your values as a human beings? Okay, that's not our focus. Our focus is when you become a teacher and you are dealing with your students, at that time, you have to wear this mask of professional ethics. From within, from inside, you are the same person, untrained, bad, unethical person. We are not bothered about it. All we are concerned with is if as a teacher in your transaction with your students, if you follow these certain ethical guidelines, it's fine. So I hope I'm making myself clear. So this is not values-based education. So this is just you're adding some ethical guidelines onto an unethical business, right? When you are teaching marketing or business management, the whole all the subjects are taught. So there is this duality, right? So all the subjects are taught as if ethics doesn't have anything to do with those subjects, right? How to do marketing and how to devise business strategies, what is education and what are the sciences and what to study in languages and whatever profession, whatever subject, right? Whatever we are teaching, the core subjects, they are devoid of the ethical teachings. And then when we become conscious about these ethics, we add a module of ethics, right? And when we want a bit more, we add the credit hours to that professional ethics module, right? So from 1 credit hour, we move to 2 credit hours, to 3 credit hours, to 10 credit hours. But again, when we have this duality, this thought that, okay, there are two spheres. So this is your technical knowledge and this is your technical education. We are making you, we are preparing you to become a whatever professional you are going to become. And then added to it, be some, like icing on a cake, we are just adding a few, sprinkling some salt of ethics on top of it, right? Just to garner and just to nourish, that's it. But this is not how it is. This is not values-based education. Based on this, what would happen is we'll have a personality where a professional would have listened to all these concepts, right? I should be honest, all right. I should have compassion. I should have respect for others. I should be tolerant. But would I actually be that person? Right? So it's not talking about that. And Allama Iqbal has said, "Lubhata hai dil ko kalam-e khatib, magar lazzat-e shauq se benasib." So whatever that orator is saying, it's very nice, and I really like it. But I don't have the, I don't have the motivation to become that person, right? So teaching ethics as if it's something that is added on to. So that's not values-based education. So what is values-based education and how to go about it? This is the question that I would like to ask in this part of my answer, in this part of my discussion. And then I'll move on to the role of a teacher, and then we'll have some discussion, inshallah. Okay. So I said values-based education is where you put values at the center of the whole learning process, all right? And then design the whole entire educational experience around it. What would you need to do? What is it about? I'll start with the modeling, role modeling. So if you want your students to have certain values, you need to model those values, right? And when I say you need to model those values, I mean the teachers need to model those values. The entire staff, non-teaching staff of the university needs to model those values. The entire atmosphere of the educational institution needs to have this consciousness about those values and needs to model those values. For example, if you want your students to be compassionate, and if you want your students to have empathy and respect for others and love, what you need to do is to think about how are your behaviors exhibiting those values. What are the behaviors from teachers, relevant behaviors that are modeling those values? How can a teacher become compassionate? How can non-teaching staff become compassionate? How can the leadership of an education institution become compassionate? What are the behaviors associated with compassion? What should be the displays on the walls, right? What should be the environment within the university that would smell compassion, right? You would see compassion, you would hear compassion, you would smell compassion, right? So this is for just a value compassion, right? So the value would change, but you need to think carefully, how are you going to model that value in that educational institution? First and foremost, the teacher, but every adult matters. Every adult matters, whether in high school or in university education. Every person that is on the campus matters, right? So if as an institution you want to your students to have certain values, you need to role model those values. First and foremost from teacher, because teacher is in a position of being a role model. If you think about the prophetic way, he wanted us to have the best character. So what did he do? Allah testified in Quran, in Surah Al-Qalam, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. He had the best of character. And لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Sumayya darwaza band kar. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. So in his life, we have the best example. So what Allah revealed was, Allah had this revelation, this wahi, And then Allah had this person modeling those values. إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ مُعَلِّمًا. He was a teacher. But what kind of a teacher? Was he just philosophizing, an armchair philosopher who was talking about moral values? No, it wasn't like this. He was a Sadiq and Amin, right? He was a Sadiq and he was Amin, right? And then he was role modeling those values entire his life. And people could see what a Sadiq person is, what a truthful person is, right? What a trustworthy person is. And then so the morality is not just about some ethical principles. It's about a living human being, living those values. And that's the difference between a philosopher and a prophet. So a philosopher can philosophize all day long about certain moral values. But would that philosopher have those values? There is no correlation there. If you get to talk to many philosophers of science, you would find, okay, so we have some hands raised. If you have a question, please go ahead. I can answer now, and I'll continue afterwards. If there's a question here. I'll continue. Okay, so you can write your questions in the chat as well, so I might be able to answer. Inshallah. Okay, so philosopher can philosophize, but why doesn't a philosopher inspire change? Why don't people, just by listening to a philosopher, don't change? People change by having the examples, living examples. So you need to have the values clearly defined. But in addition to those values being defined, you need role models, right? So if you want to have a values-based education system, the first step is to think about how are you going to have faculty members who are going to exhibit those values. The same values that you want to be reflected in your students, you have to inspire those values in your teachers. If you want hardworking students, you want to have hardworking teachers. If you want to have discipline in students, you want to have discipline in teachers. If you want compassionate students, you want compassionate teachers. If you want students who have respect, self-respect and respect for others, you want teachers who have self-respect and respect for others, right? And then I said, it's not limited to just teachers, all right? It's about everybody on the campus, starting from the guard who is opening the door, to the administration staff sitting in the fees and dues department, those clerks everywhere in the academic offices. So their dealing they should be modeling those values. And so this is the million-dollar question. So if we are not ready to have such staff, why we boast about those values in students? We can't have them, simple. This would be perceived as hypocrisy. There are a lot of people talking about values-based education, but we don't see those values in students. And in many institutions where they are talking a lot about values, students perceive all this talk as hypocrisy because you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. If you don't walk the walk and you don't talk the talk, you can't have a values-based education. All right. So the first thing about values-based education is modeling. You have to model those values. All right. And then after modeling, the second point I would really want to emphasize is having those values embedded, interwoven into the fabric of curriculum. Right. So what I mean by this, let me unpack this. So what I mean by this is not just have some modules of ethics, right? Not just have certain discussions about ethics in isolated courses. You need to have those values interwoven throughout the entire curriculum. So whatever the subject matter is taught, you are teaching, let's say you have a program in chemistry, you can't have chemistry being taught valueless and then add an ethics module and hope that the chemist would be an ethical person. You can't have doctors with a certain professional ethics module and then whole entire education of the technical subjects is devoid of values, you won't have an ethical doctor. You need to have values integrated, inculcated, interwoven within the curriculum. This is for two reasons. One obvious reason is that if the discussion on ethics is limited to the ethics module, what is the message we are giving them? We are giving them, okay, when you want, you have a choice, right? So these discussions are limited to the ethics part, but there is a whole life that is lived without ethics. Secondly, for practical purposes as well. So if you say, okay, I'll teach entire ethics using these modules, you will be adding credit hours upon credit hours upon credit hours upon credit hours. And then even then this wouldn't be enough, right? So do you afford to have an undergraduate degree where you are teaching 70 credit hours for technical subjects and 70 credit hours for ethics? It will never work. It will never happen. And even if we start doing it, I mean, it won't work because you want the professionals to serve a function in society. You don't want to compromise technical competence. You don't want to pay the cost of technical competence to achieve certain moral values, right? So this by weaving the ethical discussions and all the discussion of values within the curriculum would enable you to have not only a focus on ethics, but also to reduce the volume, reduce the credit hours that otherwise you would need. All right. So how would it work? For example, I can give an example from the subject I teach. You can think about your examples as well from your subjects, or you can share your examples as well. So currently I'm teaching biochemistry to pharmacy students in their first year of studies. So biochemistry is about what are the molecules, the chemical substances that are involved in living, right? In living organisms. So currently I'm teaching carbohydrates. So carbohydrates is a certain class of molecules which are source of energy for us. So all of us for energy rely on carbohydrates. When you teach biochemistry, you talk about the chemical structures, the chemical properties, you talk about the sources of carbohydrates, you talk about some diseases associated with it. When I thought about how to bring values while teaching carbohydrates in it, I thought about, okay, so these students are going to be pharmacists and standing in pharmacies and counseling patients. So I brought patients into the discussion, not actual patients, like the discussion about patients. So I started, okay, what are the diseases that are going to be associated with carbohydrates? And diabetes is one of those diseases. And then I asked the students to interview certain diabetic patients, all right? And there were a number of assignments related to it, all right? So interview diabetic patients, bring some actual packaging of drugs, like the medicines they are using, and then similarly, some active learning strategies which would enable them to talk to diabetic patients, to think about their role as pharmacists when they are actually going to go. Okay, so then they brought about those things and together in the class, and then I stimulated a discussion based on that. And then discussion went from what is the role of a pharmacist, so big questions related with ethics, like what is the role of pharmacists in society, came out of this, right? And about thankfulness, for example, when they met with a lot of patients, and then they didn't think about it then, they had this feeling, but I just tried to stimulate this discussion, and the discussion is about thankfulness. And just by talking to those patients, they thought about thankfulness, gratefulness to Allah. And about drugs, the cost, so cost of medication, what were the costs, what are the practices of pharmaceutical industries, all this not in a professional ethics course. The course was biochemistry, which is a basic medical subject. So I hope it wasn't I hope it was a bit clear. I'm not sure if I was clear enough. But so any subject that you are teaching, if you think about where this knowledge is going to be used, you can bring real life scenarios. And when you start talking about real life scenarios, what would happen then is You will engage students as human beings. And then all the discussions about empathy, respect, and love of learning, and about compassion, and about all the values that you want to inspire the students, you can talk about those values. But when you are talking about the subject as a professor of that subject, somebody who is into really the technical aspects of the subject, without thinking about where this knowledge is going to be used. Again, coming from an Islamic perspective, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, among the things that he sought refuge from, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa. Oh Allah, I seek refuge. Your refuge from what? From the knowledge that isn't beneficial. So when think about a lot of technical subjects that we teach in our curricula, they are of no benefit. And by just having this human element added into this subject, we will not only introduce values within the subject, in the curriculum, in the technical subjects, but also we'll make the knowledge more relevant. And if you think about the adult learning theories, adults learn more when they think that the knowledge is more relevant. So by bringing examples from their real life, we can introduce a lot of values within the subject. All right. So I talked about having this modeling, how to go about values-based education. I talked about modeling, role modeling by teachers and non-teaching staff. And then I talked about having these values integrated into the curriculum, not only in isolated professional ethics or Islamic studies modules, having all these values integrated within the curriculum. All right. The third point that I would really want to emphasize here is, okay, so, and it may seem contradictory to the second point. In the second point, I was saying, all right, you don't, not having the professional ethics is not enough. You need to have them integrated everywhere. But then there is a role for professional ethics modules as well. And this is also very important, right? Because there's a utility for these subjects as well. So just by integrating everywhere in the curriculum, this will work, but to a certain extent. You need dedicated professional ethics modules as well, right? Whether you are teaching it in Islamic studies or wherever you are teaching it, but you need to have dedicated slots for that as well. Because what you need to do is to define values. I mean, what is compassion? What is respect? What is love? What is affection? Right? What is modesty and haya? What is sabr? What is shukr? And so on and so on and so forth, right? So you need to define these values, and then you need to bring the case studies from real life to elaborate on these values. And if you don't do this, you can talk about, give me a minute, my kids are getting out of control. All right. So values, so you need to define those values, and having these modules would enable you to making the implicit explicit. This is very important. You need to make whatever is implicit in your curriculum. A lot of the time people are talking about hidden curriculum, right? Okay, so this is implicit in the curriculum. We want our students to be good citizens. We want our students to be respectful. We want them to be this, that, or other. But then this hidden curriculum, you might have a different conception of a hidden curriculum. What are the things that you are thinking and what are the things that I am thinking? There would never be a consensus among faculty members until it is hidden. You need to make all this implicit things into explicit. And how do you make these explicit? You have to write it on the walls. You want to write it on the walls. You want to include it in the curriculum. You want to have modules dedicated for these discussions. So these modules should not be limited to just readings or just lectures. It should be based on real life examples, case studies, discussions. Reflective writing is very important. But you need to have dedicated modules where you get to define these values as well. You need to give the examples and apply those values in real life, all right? Just by having certain values defined is not enough. But when you don't have definition, how our knowledge and our mind works, even if you want to change attitude of somebody, you need to transfer some knowledge as well. So having the definition of haya, let's say, or sabr, or shukr, or amana, or sidq, or adl, having the definitions of these values within your mind would enable you to build a lot of knowledge around it, right? So you think about a concept map, right? You have a concept at the center, and then you add a lot of concepts attached to it. So you have a sidq at the center, and then a lot of behaviors associated with sidq, all right? You have amana in the center, integrity or whatever, and then you think about whatever you want to inspire, right? So by having these professional ethics modules or Islamic studies modules, you are going to have, or workshops. So you need to explicitly mention those values, right? Having just thinking, okay, it's in my mind. I want my students to be this, that, or other. I mean, this is in your mind. The learning is not happening in teacher's mind or an educator's mind. The learning is happening within the student, right? In his thoughts and his behaviors. So if the student transformation isn't apparent, and you are very clear about it in your mind, the educational process is not working. So education is about the student. So if the student is not changing, there is no transformation over there. You think of yourself as very clear, the educational process is not working, right? So we need to be clear about it. So we make this implicit things explicit, right? Everything that is hidden inside, within our hearts, within our minds, buried in the depths, we want to make it clear, loud, open, apparent. So there is no ambiguity about it. Students know that we want this, right? So if you don't make it explicit, it's everybody's guess. You might be clear in your opinion, but the student perception wouldn't be clear, right? So this is very important. Making every implicit thing explicit. You want them to be good human beings, just say it out loud. Write it in your learning outcomes and make it measurable, right? And so this is how it's going to work. And then in whatever subject you are teaching, what you need to do is, yes, Mohammad Sajid Saab, your hand is raised. Do you have a question? Please go ahead.
Yes, Mohammad Sajid.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर। सबसे पहले तो सर थैंक यू, बहुत ही एक अच्छा आपने टॉपिक शुरू किया है और ये बहुत अच्छा है, काविश है। मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि आपने अभी आपने बात की थी कि ये ऑब्वियसली वैल्यू बेस्ड एजुकेशन हो जाए या कैरेक्टर बेस्ड एजुकेशन हो जाए, या इवन अभी जो आजकल सोशल एंड इमोशनल लर्निंग के हवाले से दुनिया में काविशें हो रही हैं, एजुकेशन में कैसे उसको इंटीग्रेट किया जाए, ये एक तो किस सतह पे होगा। ऑब्वियसली वी हैव प्लेथोरा ऑफ यूनिवर्सिटीज वर्किंग इन पाकिस्तान जहाँ पे ये चीज़ें होनी चाहिए, इवन इन स्कूल्स होनी चाहिए, लेकिन ये किस सतह पे होगा। फॉर एग्जांपल, फॉर इंस्टेंस जैसे आप जिस इदारे से मुंसलिक हैं वहाँ पे तो आप अपनी काविश कर रहे होंगे, दीगर यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में ये कैसे होगा। और दूसरा, ये कैसे मेजरेबल है, बिकॉज इट इज़ सॉर्ट ऑफ एन अनटेंजिबल थिंग, यानी कैसे आप उसको मेजरेबल बनाएंगे। ये एक मेरा ज़हन में क्वेश्चन आया था।
Thank you very much. There are two very important questions. So let me. I see there are other hands raised, but let me answer this question, and then we'll move to the second question. All right. So first question was about where can we do this, right? How and where? And the question was, okay, if there is a educational leadership of an institution is ready to do it. And I was going to come to that point as well. So the entire values-based education at an institution can't take place without having this educational leadership involved in it. And not just involved in it, totally buying it and owning this process, right? So if faculty members or students feel that there is no ownership for values-based education, they'll perceive it as just talk. and sloganeering, and this doesn't create an impact. So if you don't have the leadership that is aligned with those values, you can have an impact. Teachers can have an impact. And I'll get to what teachers can do. And some things that we talked about, the bits and pieces, teachers can have an impact. But to have a whole values-based education environment, you need to have the leadership there. If the leadership isn't convinced, of course, you are limited. Your options are limited. And then even if the leadership is convinced, so you need to think about all stakeholders. You need to think about the parents as well. If the students don't want this, right, how are you going to do it? So parents, and then the future employers. So what we need to do is to frame the whole argument from the perspective of all stakeholders, the government, all the sectors where the students are going to work, and make it, frame the argument, because by having these values included in the curriculum, it's going to be of benefit to everybody. And we need to convince, we need to term our argument, phrase our arguments in ways in which others are going to think, okay, it's good for us, right? And unless and until we have everybody on board, it's not going to work. We need to have all the stakeholders on board, whether it's governmental regulatory agencies, the university leadership, the teachers, the non-teaching staff, the students, the parents, the environment around, the future employers, everybody. What we can do is, instead of forcing 5 or 10 values that we think are important on everybody, of course, we have certain things in our mind, but we need to involve everybody in the consultation process. What are the values that we stand for? And when we involve everybody within that consulting process, then there is a bigger chance that they are going to buy the whole thing. Right? So right now the problem is there are many chains of schools who advocate certain values. There are certain colleges, certain universities who talk, but this is all one-way process. Right? So I am saying, as an educational institution, these are my values, and I want your son to have these values. And this doesn't work. You need to take on board. So there is a gap over there. We need to fill it. The second question is very important, and it's about assessment. And its basis is that all of these, many of these things that I'm talking about, these are intangible, right? You can't touch them. And then how are you going to measure? And since as educationists, we know assessment drives learning. And if you can't assess it, how do you know if you have made any progress, right? So I agree in part. Yes, we need to design assessment strategies that are relevant. Assessment strategies wouldn't be like written exams or papers. Assessment for values need to have 360 degrees angle. We need to include reflective writing. We need to have students writing a lot, like their feelings, their thoughts, and then reflections, right? So you do an activity and ask them to write a paragraph about it. You give them a case study and ask them to write that paragraph and then discuss about it. Then you need to have evaluation systems in place, not just assessment of students, but the whole entire evaluation of the environment where you could, so, and then these behaviors, you need to translate these values into observable behaviors. The Prophet ﷺ, if you pick up any book of hadith, for example, in the Kitab al-Iman, the book of faith, you would find so many hadith in which Iman, faith, is related to behaviors. I'll give you a couple of examples, just, so like a prophet said, لا تدخلون الجنة حتى تؤمنوا. You won't enter paradise until you believe. And then he said, and you won't believe حتى تحابوا, until you love one another. So, and shouldn't I tell you something? That would make you love one another, and that is salam, right? Spreading salam. So you wouldn't enter paradise until you believe. But when would you believe? When you love one another. All right. So you see, and then she talked about entering paradise. Entry to paradise were related to belief. And how do you believe? By loving one another. So this is a value. And how would you have this value? By having this salam. Assalamu alaikum. So behavior of saying salam is related to loving one another, the value, and the value is related to the belief. So you need to have this link. It needs a lot of thinking. For example, I'll give another example. So Prophet said, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, falyaqul khayran aw liyasmut." Whoever amongst you believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment, he should say something good or keep silent. So again, you think about, so belief in Allah and Al-Akhirah results in an observable behavior, that you speak good or remain silent. In the same hadith, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyukrim jara." Whoever believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment should give respect to his neighbor, and then it goes on to your guests as well. So if you are paying respect to your neighbor, there are certain behaviors associated with if you are respectful for your neighbor, right? So belief in the Day of Judgment and Allah, value of giving respect to your neighbors, and then observable behaviors. So we really need to think thoroughly about it. What are the observable behaviors based on these intangible values? And then work on these observable behaviors, right? And then that could be measured. I hope I answered. It was a long, but gave you some answer. Yes, Rehan Bhatt, if you want to ask a question, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
This is Rehan Bhatt from IOBM Karachi Entrepreneurship Department. As you just discussed about the clash of your second and third point, that is ethics should be covered in general subjects, and there should also be separate subject. Sometimes the core paradigm clashes with the ethical subject. For example, I teach entrepreneurship, and in capitalistic paradigm, the paradigm is profit maximization, and in Islam it is about moderation. So if we are teaching capitalistic paradigm and profit maximization in the general course, and in ethics or Islamic context, we are saying we should be moderate. So how do we address this clash?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very pertinent and important question. It needs to be answered. Well, I must confess, I'm not an expert in the area you're talking about, but I'll give a general comment, and I hope I understand your question, but I'll give a general comment about it. So my example might not be very subject specific, but let's have a general discussion. Okay, so we have an Islamic worldview based on which we think certain values are non-negotiable, and we want certain values to be in the curriculum. But the way we are taught our subjects, the way the things are written in the textbooks, it clearly clashes with those values which are prescribed in Islam. So where do I stand as a Muslim teacher? This is a dilemma that we have. I mean, by being a Muslim, I can't say that I'm going to teach a subject from a Western perspective, which is contradictory to Islamic teachings, and I wouldn't be true to my faith, even if there is no values-based education, and even if I just forego this and I just leave values-based education. Am I allowed as a Muslim to preach and to profess concepts that are contrary to Islam? And I'm not allowed to. So what we can do is there is a perspective of a preacher, somebody, a wise, who is giving a wa'az, a khutbah in the masjid. And then there is a perspective of an academic. So we need to be objective about it, right? So instead of just, I would say, bombarding the Western concepts with our ideas, I would go about presenting those ideas from the textbooks that they have written in their words in the best possible way, right? So this is being objective. And then presenting my perspective as well. I understand in certain subjects, like the core, if the core theory, the basic assumptions are different, how to reconcile, right? That would be a, I'm not in a position to say, but in general, I think this would work, that you have these two personalities. Within you are an academic who objectively, even if you disagree with certain things, you just want your students to know about it. But then you need to add your perspective. And this is where I would say education can never be value neutral. I must say this. It's my contention that education can never be value neutral, because, or even more than that, even the scientific thought, the way it is organized in disciplines, can never be value neutral. I'm not just talking about social sciences or humanities. I'm talking about natural sciences, right? For example, like biology or chemistry or physics, right? You can say in biology that there is this theory, right? But how is a theory made in science? It's unfortunate that we don't get to study philosophy of science in Pakistan. Philosophy of science, there are many philosophers of science so they call this anti-realist, right? So they don't think the purpose of science is to describe the reality. It's just about saving the phenomena. For example, if you say, okay, everything can be tested and observed in science, no, it's not the case. As a chemist, I believe there are atoms. I believe there are electrons in there. There are protons. The rejoinder would be, okay, and I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them, right? I haven't seen an atom. I haven't seen my naked eye, right? I haven't seen the atom. I haven't seen an electron. And I teach it all the time. And the chemical bonds and this and that. The rejoinder would be, okay, you haven't seen it, but there is evidence, there are articles and this and that. But science is so complex and the body of knowledge is so much that I cannot repeat all the experiments. So I am believing on authority of some other people. So science cannot be neutral, right? It's human mind that is interpreting the observations. The observation, okay, I won't go there, but even if you accept for the sake of argument that the observation is factual and neutral, the mind that is interpreting those observations and which research questions to ask and how to ask them and how to answer them. This is all not objective. This is subjective to human choices. So the sciences are not value neutral. But when you come to education of these sciences, this can never be value neutral. As soon as you are a teacher, you are a human being talking to other human beings, educating them about certain things. You cannot be value neutral. You are speaking, you are standing or sitting in your classroom, you have a certain tone in which you are speaking, you have an environment, you have a blackboard or a projector, and then it's a one-way lecture or an interactive lecture. It's about so many things there. All the time it's filled with values. It's a human interaction. So human interaction can never be value neutral. There would be value. So my contention is, when we think about values, value-free education, we are deluding ourselves. It's just that we have deluded ourselves into thinking that we are rational beings. We are not rational beings this way, right? So we have values, and then we just don't profess them. Okay, so I just drifted a bit, but I think I touched your question a bit. So you can come back again at the end. If we don't have any more questions, I would just like to finish off the discussion that was in the middle. So I was saying, if we want to have values-based education, we need to have modeling by human beings, right? And by human beings, I mean teachers, non-teaching staff, academic leadership, everybody, right? And the walls, the atmosphere should model those values, right? Atmosphere, what the displays, the advertising, the policies and procedures, everything should model that value. The workload of faculty should model that value. And so modeling is the first thing for values-based education. The second thing I said we need to have everything, every value integrated within the curriculum. We shouldn't differentiate between technical and non-technical subjects. And then non-technical subjects, we should have a lot of, these values-based discussions. We need to have values-based discussion in every course, but in different ways. For example, certain teacher, when you walk into a class, there are first 5 minutes of a class, students are walking in. What do you do then? You are just having a general chit chat. At the end of the class, what are you doing? So, and then you can have different teaching methodologies. You sometimes have collaborative learning in your class. Why do you have collaborative learning? There are values behind it, right? Educational philosophies behind it. Why not be open about it and accept it? And then I said there needs to be some modules, whether it is in the form of workshops or courses or whatever, or longitudinal curricular themes, but you need to have some amount of time dedicated for values education, where it's not just about defining values, although defining values is important, as I said, because this will give the students the framework on which to build every other thing, to scaffold the knowledge. So to have these definitions of values, having examples of these values, real world examples, and then their higher order thinking about how they are going to apply it, and then reflective writing in there. So I think if we get this in an interactive way and we get students engaged in it, then we need to have community service projects for students as well, where they actually, so the purpose is not just to get them to do something, it's about get them to reflect and engage with that topic, right? And then when they start discussing, doing things, reflecting on it, writing and sharing their thoughts, they start to have this, they get those cognitive structures where they could think about values. So we are not taught how to think about values and how to make these decisions. This would be very important. All right. Yes, there is a raised hand here. Rehan, what's up? Have you raised your hand again, or is the old hand?
Thank you for giving the opportunity.
I lost you.
His connection is not.
I wanted to ask, as you said that we should communicate different values which are available. Should the teacher declare his own values, or should he try to be neutral in that?
Yeah. Again, it's a very important question. Should we take a neutral stance? And then where does this come from? It comes from a conception of a professor who is true to his academic discipline and who has objective opinions, right? I don't think this exists, right? I don't think this is possible. No human being can be neutral in terms of values. But having said that, it's one way to say that I think these are my values and I stand for them and this is what it is, but I want you to have your own journey, right? I'll have a discussion with you about it. I think we need to have discussion, but students need to think about their values for themselves. One thing that is missing in our teacher education, especially in higher education sector in Pakistan, is I remember when I was in Sweden for my master's and doctoral studies, teachers during the teacher training programs, you are supposed to write your teaching philosophy. So every teacher has a document, and when you are being promoted from, say, assistant professor to associate professor to full professor, you need to have this document where you state in 1 page or 1.5 or 2 pages, what is your teaching philosophy, educational philosophy, and then how do you apply your teaching philosophy in your teaching practice? So this is very important. And we don't have to be very neutral. We shouldn't be overly concerned about sounding neutral. But if we appear to be on the other hand, like on the other end of the spectrum, where we seem to be like somebody who is very opinionated, who isn't ready to listen to others, who has certain preconceived notions and fixated on those and not ready to engage with others, then you can't engage in values-based education. So you need to have this openness where you are clear what your values are and you are communicating them clearly, but then you are giving the students the room where they could differ, not because you want difference of opinions just for that, but because you want them to engage in thinking about values. So having one or two values is good values. But what is more important in values-based education, in my opinion, is having this attitude of thinking about values in daily transactions. And then if you help them, if you want to facilitate this, your students to be conscious about their values and to develop those values, then you need to have these discussions. And if you come across as a person who is very strong-willed and is very disciplinarian and who is stuck on his values, you won't be able to facilitate students' learning process. We are very transparent as teachers. Even if you are open to having discussions and you are tolerating difference of opinion, if you have certain points of view, they would come across, right? You would come across as a person who has these values, right? But at the same time, you are giving them the chance to explore their values. I hope it answers your question. Zakia Nilofer Sahiba, please go ahead. Please unmute. Your mic is muted.
Assalamu alaikum.
Ji walaikum assalam.
Sir, all what are you discussing about? I think it's not that difficult or it's not that different for us being Muslims. Because just by reciting one hadith with its translation, with its explanation, its true spirit, not only by Islamia teachers, but any other language subject can be done through that. The language teacher can also do that. We can inculcate the true spirits of compassion, humanity, amanat, sidq, adal, what all the moral values which are the basic requirements of a good human being. We can inculcate through them. It's not that entangled or difficult subject that we are discussing, but the point here is this, that by the stress of syllabus or by the completion of the things that we have to do, the teachers are lacking these areas. Otherwise, it's not a big deal at all.
Yeah, I understand. So, Jazakallah khair, very important point that you raised. It's not difficult, it's not rocket science. You just need to have some, you just recite a verse, that works wonders, right? But we are so much preoccupied with the course coverage that we go through the entire course outline, and until that isn't completed, and during the semester there are always some holidays because of this or that or the other reason, and then we are always lagging behind in finishing the syllabus, and teachers are preoccupied in just completing the syllabus somehow. But my argument would be here that even if you just reject values-based education, right? Just reject the values-based education. What is the role of a teacher? Is it just course coverage? No, it isn't. When you write learning outcomes, you write for knowledge, skills, and for attitude. You don't term it as values-based education, but you need to have this. And this is a fundamental flaw in our current educational theory when we base everything on Bloom's taxonomy. I mean, this is a problem. So Bloom's taxonomy by Benjamin Bloom, I hope most of us know what I'm talking about. So Bloom's taxonomy was for cognitive domain, right? Or it was about knowledge. It's up here, right? Remembering, understanding, applying, and progressively higher order thinking. And then based on behaviorist theories of education, we say, okay, we need to write learning outcomes that are observable, measurable, blah, 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 because unless we do it, we can't design appropriate teaching methodologies and we can't assess, right? So what we are preoccupied with is then a framework that was primarily designed for knowledge domain, And we want to gauge every step of attitude according to that. I don't want to say that assessment isn't important. All right. I don't want to say program evaluation doesn't matter. Okay, it matters. Otherwise, how are you going to know if it's working or not? But we need to have an open-mindedness about how are we going to assess, what are going to be the teaching methodologies, and even if we don't get to design, learning outcomes which are as fancy or as accurate or as measurable to the decimal point in the cognitive domain, even if we are not getting to measure honesty that way, we should be fine. We should be focused on more on our teaching learning methodologies, right? How are we facilitating students? Of course, we need assessment, but that's just a tool, and it comes after. Okay, so there are two other hands raised. It's Saira Rahman, Saiba, and Hina Saiba. Saira Rahman, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum assalam.
So, as you have said in your presentation, that if students' transformation is not clear, education process is not working. So, initially, in any organization, is it suggested that we can start at a small base, and after seeing its pros and cons, we can drag it the whole system?
Sorry, can you repeat, please? I just couldn't follow. Can you repeat?
Like you have said in presentation that if students' transformation is not clear, education process is not working.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
At initial level, can we start at a small space, and then after seeing its pros and cons, we can implement to the whole organization level?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's very good. That's very important. Because you're a teacher. Are you a teacher at a university?
You can say that thing, sir.
Yeah. So for individual teachers, lecturers, faculty members, we can always develop new ideas and test on a small scale, right? And then we can implement at a small scale, and then if something works, we can always, extrapolate, and we could just scale up. This is the natural thing. But the values-based education, the entire concept applying in entirety, this won't happen until it's a whole institution. The institution could be of a small size, right? It could be just like 100 people or a small department, right? It could be a small department as well. But you need to have everybody on board in that department. But of course, if you want to add certain thing in values-based education, of course, you need to start to experiment on a smaller scale, and then you can extrapolate. And there are many things that teachers can do daily in their class, whether you consider teaching as a scholarship and whether you are improving. So you'll get ideas by working on smaller scale. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Ji, Ms. Hina, do you have a question?
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, this is a very fine topic you have to raise today, mashallah. Sir, as my concept and clearance with your topic is that being a teacher, there is a responsibility that we are not just teaching. There is no need only of talim. Actually, now need talim or tarbiyat.
Yep.
If there is talim without tarbiyat, we can't say that we are performing our full-fledged, action towards the new generation. So आपने जो भी बताया उस सबको सुनते हुए, these all are the, being a human, these are aspects in us. वो तमाम चीजें हम में हैं, वो हम शुरू से देखते चले आ रहे हैं. And being Muslim, this is our responsibility to give to the others, to convert to the other generation. And being a teacher, this is a big responsibility on our shoulders, that we have to do something for the new generation. We have to give these all aspects and these all tarbiyats towards our new generation as we are dealing the preschool. So it is the big, responsibility for us that we have to create these things, patience, synergize, and these all things, as you said, patience, synergize, and the association, bhaichara, ye sab cheezein, sir, who is giving us? Islam is giving us, and you are saying we have to do this. So sir, it's my humble request that we should not only focus on the SOS. So we have to focus on that we have to cover the SOS but we have to realize these things and feel this responsibility that we have to do the students not only talim, we go with the tarbiyat as well. So then maybe we will be able to give the something good towards our new generation. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would take you, thank you very much for this. You used the word talim and tarbiyah both. I would rather argue that taking your argument one step further, we need to do talim and we need to do tarbiyah. I would say the tarbiyah is a part of talim, right? So if we are doing talim without tarbiyah, we are not doing talim as a whole. So because when we say, okay, we need to do talim and we need to do tarbiyah, it means as if certain things are talim and certain things are tarbiyah, right? I would rather say that, okay, this is one, right? So if we are conducting proper talim, proper education, tarbiyah will be a part of it, right? So without tarbiyah, the education process is not complete. And this is not coming from just Islamic perspective. You know, if you think about any theories of curriculum and theories of education, this is a problem. We don't study education, especially at university level. Teachers, we are just PhDs in our subject and we start teaching. Nobody taught us about what is education, what are the theories of education, philosophy of education. Whenever you are just think about education, it's about not just knowledge, it's about skills, it's about attitude. Attitude has to be embedded. You need to think about what attitude you need your students to have. All right, I'll take just one more question. This again from Saira Rahman. Saiba, please go ahead.
So you have talked about dedicated modules.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
what can be the duration, and they're going to be inbuilt in the curriculum, or we have to take some extra period for that thing? And who can be engaged in preparing these modules as well?
Yeah. This is a very important question. I think these modules need to be relevant to students. And what do I mean by relevant to students? These should not just be talking about the moral principles abstracted from reality, right? These modules should be about defining things, but also about applying the concepts in reality. So, for example, if you are teaching, this will vary from subject to subject, all right? So if you are, so I'm coming from this healthcare profession background. So then you need to focus a lot on the real life scenarios a healthcare professional is going to face, but then present that scenario and use that scenario to take the discussion towards moral principles. So you see where I'm getting to? So it's not just about discussion on the scenario. You present something to stimulate thought and stimulate a discussion and reflection and engagement with the content. Once you start getting the discussion going, you can channelize the discussion, facilitate the discussion into the direction of a general discussion about ethical values. So the modules, what should be the duration of module? It depends which educational setting we are talking about and how much is it possible. But I would say there should be certain credit hours for a graduate degree program. We need to have, I don't know if there should be credit hours for community service. And then community service shouldn't just be about, okay, they go somewhere and did that. It should be properly designed. There should be a rubric, all right? So this is how they choose a project. This is what they're supposed to do in the project. This is how it is going to be assessed. This is what they're going to write in the report. How are they going to talk about values in those, all right? So there should be some credit hours for this community service, some credit hours for workshops related to, let's say, where you are discussing about these things, right? So students, maybe there could be something like in every semester, every student has to take one workshop, let's say, and then that workshop could be a few hours. Then you can have certain, so right now from Higher Education Commission, we have this general education courses. It's a binding on all universities in Pakistan. We have to have these general education courses. It's how many credit hours? I don't know, it's 30 or 30 are mandatory, I guess, for every undergraduate degree. So what are we going to study in these 30 credit hours? We already have this framework. So you need to study arts and humanities in it. You need to study national sciences in it. You need to study ethics in it. So we have these credit hours now within the undergraduate curriculum. Ali, एक minute. So we need to have these credit hours. We utilize these credit hours. I think we don't need any extra special credit hours, but we need to use our Islamic study credit hours properly. We need to use Pakistan study credit hours properly. We need to use these all ethics credit hours efficiently. Yeah.
Yes, we have any more question? Accept your points are complete now, or you want to add something?
Yeah, that's it. Alhamdulillah. I would just like to give this final statement that values-based education and the role of teachers, there is a role for teachers, but only teachers can't bring about this whole change. But teachers need to be teachers as well as collaborators with other stakeholders within the education ecosystem. So our responsibility is not just limited to our classroom and curriculum development, but also to act as collaborator, facilitator, as a stakeholder in the general educational ecosystem. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much. If you have any more question, any one of you, you can raise your hand. We have a lot of international participants from many parts of the world. So if you have anything to ask or add anything from your side, from your part of the world, so it will also be good. If there is nothing, we can conclude. We can conclude it. Dr. Saab, it's a pleasure. It was an honor to have you here, and we are very pleased and satisfied that Rifa International University is doing a lot of good work in this direction. We don't see it in this systematic and organized way in other universities. So we need to learn a lot from your experiences, and hopefully, inshallah, we will be having more interactions on different lectures and workshops, in holding different programs like this. And we will benefit, and inshallah, from your experiences that you have got at Rifa International University and your different campuses around Pakistan. Some of the participants raised his hand, and then I just missed it. So if there is a question, just raise your hand.
Jazakallah khair for invitation. It was a pleasure talking here. And yeah, we are taking certain actions at Rifa. Some are more successful, some are not so much. So yeah, we can at least have a discussion on things that work or don't. Inshallah.
Yes, inshallah. I would like to check if Dr. Shahid Rafi, our Secretary General of Center for Peace and Global Studies, is there. He may join us for the final word. Dr. Saab, you are there? Actually, he's supposed to be with us, but he was not feeling well, so I'm not sure that he's available or not. I believe, I think he's not there. So thank you very much, all participants, all brothers and sisters, teachers from different schools, universities, and different wait, we have a question here. Yes, Saira sister, you can ask your question, and I have a question in chat box. Let me read it. Yes, Saira Rahman Saiba.
Sir, I have put 1 or 2 questions in the chat box. Is it possible to answer those questions?
Yes, you can ask it. I'm just focusing on the last one. You can ask your question.
Okay, right.
I have missed it.
Okay, right. Sir, currently the students at the school level, the teachers are putting the 100%, but still that element of character building, we're not getting the 100% result. So, this kind of, we're not getting the outcomes also. So where actually is the flaw, and how that flaw can be addressed also?
This is a big question. It requires another hour, but let me say that character transformation, it's not like a one-dimensional thing, and there are so many factors that affect it, right? So all of us are contributing, but at the end of the day, it's not just about what we do. It's what the parents focus on, what they are learning from their peers. So the whole educational environment, or not just only the educational environment, the society at large is influencing the student character. What are they learning from social media, general media? What are they watching, and what are they, what are they talking about with their friends? So there are so many factors. It's I don't want to say that what we are doing in educational institutions is good enough, but we shouldn't be so critical, because this change in a person and having seeing these values, it's a multifactorial process. But within the educational institutions, I think despite doing all of the good things, we are lacking in clarity of thought. Right? We have struggled to convey to our students that their academic grades are important, but together with academic grades, their personality and character is even more important. You can see it like in our examples, daily example. If my kid, as a parent, if my son doesn't pray Fajr, Salatul Fajr, compared to he doesn't get good grades in a monthly test, what am I focusing on as a parent? Am I concerned about Quran education of my kids more than them studying, I don't know, any subject, any other subject? So, I mean, we have these, we have a lot of good things there, but we don't give them due importance. So I think we need to put a lot of good things at the center. And then there would be clarity in students' mind as well in our minds.
We have a question here in the chat box. It's something related to the respect that previously we found that people were trying to respect their teacher and taking their shoes and helping them put on their shoes like that. But now we don't find such respect between teacher and student. Is there anything that you can, why is it so? What is missing? Someone is asking here in the chat box.
This is very, especially after the Corona pandemic. The campuses were closed for 2 years, I believe. And then when we came back and opened the campuses, what happened was the students who just joined the university in first year, now they were in their third year or fourth year, right? And the whole campus life changed. Now we walk in corridors, the same corridors, the students are walking there. Nobody would give you space to walk from there. There's a lot of disrespect. Yeah, I agree. And in general, our society is there is a moral crisis here. There's lack of hope. So hopelessness is another thing because of in the last couple of years, because of this financial crunch that we are facing, students don't have any hope. And giving them hope is important. And they think a lot of this disrespect is coming from their thinking that they think all of this thing happening is useless. They consider transaction with their teachers as a business transaction. Like we are paying the fees and they are getting the salaries. And so they find this connection, and then, so how are they going to respect? And still teachers have respect for teachers who are concerned about them. As teachers, I don't know about schools. I have conducted some trainings in schools, but my teaching experience is related to university. A lot of university faculty members are concerned about their publications, their career growth. They're not concerned about students. And if I am not concerned about students, how do I expect them to have, teachers didn't used to be like us. And we are just concerned about, the teachers used to have, there were many more teachers who were masters of their own subjects and who were genuinely concerned about students. So there is a lacking at our end as well. But I agree, there is a general lack of disrespect in our society, and that has affected our students as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for your time, for accepting our invitation and request for this lecture today. I hope we will have more interaction from this forum and other forums, inshallah. Thank you to all the participants who joined us today. So just a reminder for your information that this is our regular activity of Center for Peace and Global Studies. We hold a monthly online lecture on the last Saturday at the same time that we were having it today. Next month, inshallah, the same day, same time, we will have another scholar on a different topic related to education, Islamization of education, teaching skill or whatsoever, any topic, whatever you will find. Our last lecture was about Maqasid Sharia. And all these lectures, this was 16th lecture, or all these lectures are available on the Facebook page of Center for Peace and Global Studies, as well as on the YouTube channel of Center for Peace and Global Studies. We have WhatsApp groups. If you are interested in joining them or getting information about other activities, you can come and join those groups. And thank you very much for being with us today. We conclude today with again thanking Dr. Sohaib Saab for joining us today. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.